Welcome to Conversations from the Alcove. My name is Caridad Svich. I'm a playwright, and I'm also Artistic Director of the Alcove New Play Development Program at the Lucille Lortel Theater in New York City. If you've been to the show before, you know that it's a series that looks at playwriting and its intersections with the world, art, craft, and other things. And often not necessarily in that order. Sometimes we start with the world and then we go to playwriting and then craft, right? So things get sort of bundled up. Our guest today is Phanesia Pharel. Thank you, Phanesia, for being here. I'm going to start with an audio description of myself before I launch into introducing you to her. And am I saying your pronouns correctly? Sorry, I forgot to ask.
She,
Do you go by
hers.
her? She, hers. Okay, just making sure. Forgive me for assuming. I am a fair-skinned person. Today I'm wearing my hair up. My hair is sort of, what color is my hair? What color is my hair? This is always a question when I do this podcast. It's brown, but it has gold flecks in it. And I've got bangs. Their bangs are on my forehead. And I'm wearing eyeglasses, and they're sort of tortoiseshell. They're round and they're biggish, and they're on the tip of my nose. And I'm wearing red lipstick, which we've been talking about offline in a great detail. And today I haven't worn this top before, So I'm wearing it's kind of a colorful top. It's got a red background and it's got white ivory. They're really ivory flowers. And they're big flowers and they're kind of just all over the background, and they're being very festive. And it's a gray day. And so I felt like wearing something colorful to cheer myself up. My background is white, grayish, because of this cast of the light. You'll see maybe the outline of a window with blinds on it on one side. More importantly, our guest is Phanesia Pharel. They are a Haitian-American playwright from a dragon fruit farm. I want to know all about this. From a dragon fruit farm in Miami. Daughter of an immigrant teacher and farmer. She writes to honor people. Many works produced and also in process: The WATERFALL, R&B, Lucky, Black Girl Joy. I've had the privilege to be reading a couple of Phanesia's plays, and I'm smitten with them. And they also have a BA. I didn't know this, so this is kind of cool. A BA in Urban Studies from Barnard College at Columbia, and an MFA currently about to graduate. Am I right about this?
I'm almost out.
Oh my gosh, a momentous time from UC San Diego, which is my alma mater. So welcome, Phanesia. Yay for UCSD and all the UCSDers. Yay. Sometimes we got to do a little UCSD pride, right?
Yes.
Super
Trojans
cool.
up.
That's right. So I always start every episode, if you guys who followed this episode, these series before, know that I always start with the same question, which is, how is the climate crisis affecting your art practice?
It's a great question. I think almost every single day about sets, like every time I go watch a play or I'm in the theater, I'm like, do they really throw away all of this stuff? Do we really not give everything back to another theater? So I'm thinking about that all the time, and if there's a way we could make even just the process of making theater more sustainable. I am from a dragon fruit farm in Miami. Caridad, it is crazy that you are reading my plays or like my plays, because I've known about you since I was like a teenager in Miami. You are a Miami OG. OG.
Yay. So
we
cool.
Don't look, like you're one of the people from Miami who like have gone out and made it and done the thing. And especially, Miami is like, North Cuba. And so,
right. Yes,
you are loved. Yes.
Yay.
Yes. And
that's nice to hear.
Yes.
I hope my work gets done in Miami one day again. It's been forever, and I keep dreaming that, somebody will like say, hey, maybe we'll do one of your plays in Miami. And I'll be like, okay, but maybe one day one can dream.
I hope. I mean, it's so interesting because Miami is such a beautiful city and there's so much great theater, but your plays are probably being done in Miami under the table and you don't know about them.
Under the table? Oh, no.
Under the table, I shouldn't name names, but there are great theater companies that, are like, people are doing, that's what I love about Miami. People are doing theater like, in shipping containers and in different ways that are not necessarily like the traditional New York
Right.
or regional.
Yeah, yeah. Is that how you got into playwriting? I mean, I'm curious what led you to playwriting, because it feels like, I know from when I grew up in Miami that there was like nothing. You know what I mean? I was like, I don't know what plays, and it wasn't, I had a professor, I should say a teacher, because it was not a college, but at junior high, who said, you should look at plays, because they thought my writing had something theatrical about it. And I literally had nowhere, outside of school plays, you know what I mean? Like, I didn't know where to look. And so I just read a lot of stuff, right? That was the way I went in. I went to my local library and I just read a bunch of plays, which I'm so glad, because the local library had a huge selection of plays. And so that was like my tutelage, my self-tutelage. And it's what got me interested in playwriting. But I know that Miami since then has found its small and not so small pockets of theatrical activity. And so I wonder if that's where it started for you, or was it later?
Well, I'm curious which library, if I can ask which library you would go to in Miami. I went to a lot of Miami libraries growing up. So
okay, yeah, I was it was called JFK Library, and it was in Hialeah, Florida, because I grew up in Hialeah.
Wait a second. My mom used to teach at Hialeah. I spent a lot of my childhood in Hialeah.
What?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, this is so funny. Yeah. That library was like I spent more hours than I can think in that library. It was like my little second home, because I would just go there after school and be like, read stuff and, check out. I would check out 10 books a week, and I would read them, and I would come back and check out 10 more. And like, and it was just like a cool place to hang out. That's where I read a lot of like, I was obsessed with like art criticism. Like film and dance and theater criticism, and they had a lot of periodicals. So I would just read, like, and I was also like, so for those of you, there used to be something called microfiche. So, and I would like scroll through like stuff that I couldn't find. Like, I would look up, and it'd be like referencing some review of some show that there was no way I could see, because it was like from way before. And so I'd be like, I have to find a review of the show, because I need to find out what people were saying about. I was like that nerdy, and the librarian, who was very nice. It's on the microfiche. Let me pull up the thing. Like, you go over there, go to the machine, and I would just read. I read so much stuff, like so many critics, like famous, the old critics from the New York Times that nobody remembers anymore, and just reading, because I wanted to figure out like how people talked about theater, as well as like reading plays and like figuring what this form is. But yeah, it was all because of that library.
The libraries are amazing.
Libraries, we need them, especially they're coming under attack in this country for a lot of reasons, and we need them desperately. That's like, it's the democratic space, right? Like, that whole thing. Remember, like, when you're a kid and you're like, you mean I can read the book for free?
Yes.
Like, yes, I can. Like, it's amazing. I don't have to buy the book. I can read it for free, and then I can put it back, and then somebody else will read it, and then and then they'll bring new titles every week. I mean, it was just like magic, right? Like, it's just like there's nothing like it.
And it keeps the publishing industry afloat. It helps playwrights stay afloat. They're buying these books,
Yeah.
They changed my hometown library. It was around for a really long time, the Homestead Library, and now it's more of a cyber library, which is kind of, I'm not a fan. I think we need hard copy, and we need both, but
we need both. Yeah. Also, because digital is not reliable, as we know. I mean, what did I read? Did I just read somebody yesterday? Oh my gosh, somebody yesterday was. Oh yeah. I saw somebody, they posted online, they said they were looking for that YouTube wiped like whole series of like ballroom, like voguing, like, ballroom culture stuff. And they like erased it. Like, and somebody posted and said, literally, that's the only archive we had of some of these images, and they're gone. Like, that were available to the public, unless you're a scholar and, you have your university digitize it and then blah, blah, blah. And I was like, that's right? Like, so that thing that sometimes we think about, like things stay online forever, they don't actually.
No.
They don't stay online forever. So yes, the hard copy is really important. Yeah.
I completely agree. And even with television, I mean, I love television. I like want television to find its way back to being more of a dominant force in our culture, because I think that's really helpful and important. But a lot of TV shows that like networks will literally just delete off the face of the earth, then we've lost it. I mean, it has to be in our own hands, and I agree with you. That's what makes the library so special.
Yeah. But playwriting, how did you get into it? I want to know the story. Tell us the story.
I'm not letting you off the hook. I do that sometimes. So actually, I'm really grateful to a theater company called City Theater Miami. They had a public program where they received funding to essentially get young people in Miami-Dade public county schools, particularly from schools that were maybe underfunded. And I was one of the students. At the time, I wanted to be a stand-up comedian. And so like I loved Tina Fey, and she would always.
Oh my gosh.
I know.
Wow.
It's kind of embarrassing, but like I still love comedy. And
Yeah.
Tina Fey was like, you have to write for yourself and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I was a total nerd theater kid. And I went to this theater conference, and it was the City Theater. They did this playwrights conference, and they had us like be a part of it as young people. It was a public program. And one of the speakers was Marsha Norman. And I had just directed Night Mother at my high school because I was a weirdo.
You did theater in high school?
I was
really?
not well.
Like that's a tough play. You know, that for high school, that's intense, man.
Oh. And then the year after, I did Funny House of a Negro. It only got better.
Oh my heavens! It's like, oh my heavens! But you got to meet Marsha.
I met Marsha.
And you were like, I directed your play, Marsha. Is that how it happened?
I told her that. She looked horrified. She was like, who is this like young girl? What did she do with my play? And I got to see and hear from playwrights all week, and we were doing exercises, and really wonderful playwrights came in to talk to us. And one writer who's Haitian-American, Francoise Benson, had won the competition that year. And her wonderful 10-minute play, Risen from the Dough, that I'm still obsessed with. I couldn't stay because I lived in Homestead, and we don't have the best public transportation in Miami. So, as you know, and so I had to I would take 2 buses and the metro line up to get to Miami, like the fancy part of Miami for this. And my parents were like, you have to be home by a certain time. So I almost missed her show. She saved me a ticket because she remembered me. She remembered this little Haitian girl, and she saved me a ticket. I went on the Saturday matinee show, and I could cry talking about it. I was so blown away by the play, and I'm still writing. I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. I mean, that week I just fell in love with playwriting. I was like, I could write a play. I didn't even know I could write a play. So I've been on and off doing it ever since. And yeah.
So I'm curious about the trajectory here. So that's really fascinating. But you didn't do theater for your BA, right? So why not? Were you like, no more, I can't do theater, I have to do something else? Or was it more like you wanted to explore a different topic?
Yeah, I was interested in, I really loved urban studies. I love the themes, the questions. Like I got to take classes I took one class that I'm still obsessed with that was about like the housing insecurity in the United States. And we got to tour and essentially study how did homelessness become an institution in this country. What is the story of redlining, for example? How do we build what is the built environment? And all of these systems that I'm now interested in exploring in my writing, like crime, public education. I've always been obsessed with public education. My first play was about public education. And the way my friends were being treated in our public school. I just wanted to study these topics. I just was obsessed with it.
Oh, that's so cool. So super interesting. Yeah. I remember like I was like one of the, I probably wasn't smart because I did theater both as for my BA and my MFA.
No,
And
I
so
know.
I was like theater 24/7. But I'm not sure that that was the wisest thing that I should have done. But I did do translation as a kind of minor in college before I did grad school, which was something that I was really passionate about. And so, because I really wanted to translate Spanish poetry into English, and then particularly Lorca, and then of course that ended up being one of my things, right? Like that I kind of took off with. But later, but it's sometimes I think about it, maybe I should have done like a different BA, like an English lit or like something like that, because I was always taking those other classes and I wanted to take other classes, and I felt like in theater there was this whole thing of you just do theater all the time, right? And I think that that can be a sometimes very insular experience, if that's all you're doing, right? Because as writers, we write about the world, and sometimes we write about theater, but theater is in the world. I keep saying that to people. I know probably people are tired of me saying this, but I'm like, theater, please be in the world.
Mm.
Don't shield yourself from. So this is okay. Pet peeve. Sorry, pet peeve. I'll stop. But the pet peeve is like, I feel like sometimes the theater, let's say industry, and its ethos is. Sometimes it's framed this way. We're the space that's over there, and you come and it's safe and you do the thing, and like, it's separate from the world. And I'm like, actually it's in the world. It's in the world because it's part of capitalism, right? Like in the US, it's part of capitalism, right? So I think that there's this kind of like strange thing of like, yes, when you're experiencing a play, however you experience it as an audience member, perhaps you do feel like you're suspended. You do feel like you've entered some other realm. I totally get that, but I also think, but like it is related to like what's happening outside of the theater space. Even if it's an abstract piece, it's still related, right? So, and I think that. So I always worry about this. I always worry about this tension between the theater space and what is called the world out there, and how they need to be kind of together, and then and that way, offline we were talking about moral courage and and so forth, and I think that's something that would force, I think, some companies to think about like what their moral and civic and ethical relationship is to their media communities and also to the world at large as civic institutions. And of course now we're seeing, in the US that there's a lot of vilifying of civic institutions. And so I think that this is, in one sense, this is a time, but it's always been the time, right, to stand up, right? So, these are things I think about. I wonder your thoughts around this. I shouldn't prattle on. This should be about you. So yeah.
I would sit here and listen to you talk all day. No, seriously, please. You're smarter than the world. Like, you are so freaking smart, and you are a master of language. And I think that I hear what you're saying about like theater, but when I read your work, I don't see someone who's insular and out of the world. I see someone who's got the language and is in the world. And in terms of institutions, I think the most frustrating thing for me is, I love theater and I love it so much. I've loved it. It's my longest love, but I really struggle with how inaccessible theater is, and how sometimes I'll even I'll tell my as a TA here, I'll tell students in some of my sections, I'll say, I need you guys to see this play, that play, and then I have to stop and think, well, what if they can't afford to see that play?
Right. Yeah.
It's hard to know how to get a ticket.
Yeah.
I just get complimentary, people will send me, hey, here's a comp for this, here's a comp for that. So, I'm removed from that experience. But for the average American, it's like, and I do believe plays are powerful, and I believe plays and like just plays can change. I know Oscar uses his TED Talk, it goes around and everybody uses it, and I'll use it again. It's like, I believe it is a democratic practice. I believe it makes us more human. And I think now right now in this time where people are so isolated and alone and feeling just overwhelmed, I think technology is helpful in some ways, but I think overall, I don't personally think it's a net good. And I think theater is a great antidote for that. So, I mean, were people happier with, yes, there were certain things. There were certain things that were much worse in 1970, but to a certain extent, there were things that were a lot better because, you'd have to walk up to someone to see how they're doing. You don't get to take certain things for granted. Our imagination was more enacted. We need to constantly be practicing our imagination. And this AI thing is very disturbing. And so I'm very pro theater. I'm very pro oldie. I'm very pro hard copy books. And I think the theater needs to reach out to communities. I think the theater needs to reach out to people. I think more theater needs to be free.
Yeah. And remember when there was this initiative not that long ago in American theater that was called radical hospitality. A couple of companies did it where they would select Mixed Blood, for example. Mixed Blood Theater in Minneapolis devoted like their entire seasons to radical hospitality, which was that they would reserve, I think it was like maybe 20 to 50 seats. They had a small house, but 20 to 50 seats every night. That would be like free or like $5. You know what I mean? Like it would just be like whatever you can pay or and so forth. And then there would be others that would not be that. But it was, for a while, a lot of theaters were talking about that. They were like, yeah, radical hospitality. And then we've swung really the other way where we have, I don't know what it's like in San Diego right now, but in New York, it's outrageous. $400 for a seat, $350, $80 to see something downtown. Maybe that's the cheap ticket. You know what I mean? Like, and I often think like, who is that for? Certainly, as an artist, I'm like, I can't afford that ticket. I can't afford that ticket. When am I, And so it feels like it's constantly pricing itself out of its audience to the point where it's like, that's what I mean also about being in the world. It's sort of like, well, you're not really then in the world because it's like the world can't access you, right?
Yes.
We also have this other technology, which is called streaming and broadcasting of work, which we do know, like, I'm just going to give a shout out to some folks like NT at Home and Stratford Festival at Home and others,
Yes.
that are dedicated to like putting work online and making it accessible, that I can get a subscription for $20 every month at NT at Home and see, I mean, like, amazing things. Is it all like stunning? No, but whatever. It's like an amazing resource. And I couldn't pay for all those tickets, right? Like, it's also that thing of like, I can see the thing. I was talking to a writer recently and we were talking about, we just want people to see what we do, right? Like
literally.
We have an artistry, it's a craft, and like, can people see what we do? Why are we hiding it? Why are we hiding it behind doors? Like, if Meta Opera can stream, why can't we? Like, I think that, it's like, why are we hiding our craft? Why are we hiding what we do? Because actually, one of the things about access is that it also, like I said, like when I was in Miami, I was like, I don't know where to go, like theater, I don't know, but I could maybe see something on, public broadcasting, or I could listen to a radio drama, like that was, from BBC or whatever. And it was like, oh, like there's that, or I could listen to a recording from a Broadway show or something, like it was a way to have access to the thing. Just, there's that famous story of Lin-Manuel seeing something in the park with George, right? Like, in public broadcasting and saying, oh, that show is amazing, right? Like, but that is access. That is actually like, see the thing. This is cool. You want to do this thing? Or like friends of mine who like, are living in Kansas or living in Iowa or like whatever, where there's not a lot of theater happening. I'm sorry, there's just not a lot of theater happening. And like, they're like, I see that. I mean, oh my gosh. They'll be like, I saw that one number on the Tony Awards and I play it over and over and over again. And you're like, dude, but it shouldn't just be one number. You should have access to the whole thing, right? Like, so I think that there's something about our industry, again, in this thing of like being in the world of like, we're hiding the work. And also we're in the end times. And I'm like, why are we hiding the work in the end times?
I know.
Like, I don't know, dude. Like, what are we waiting for? Like, just share it with people and like get it. And also, get more theater geeks, right? Like, I have big. I'm going to say something naughty, which is to say, like the bootleggers, right? The bootleggers, you know them. The bootleggers,
Yeah.
the musical theater kids, right? Who are kind of like, and I'm just going to say, like, they love it so much. They love it so much, and they know that other people can't have access to it. They're like, here's the thing. And some of them are like, oh wow, that's the thing. I hope one day I can go see that thing live. But meanwhile, I have this. And maybe one day I won't because I can't afford the ticket, but I got this and it's shot grainily or it's shot, you know what I mean? Like it's not a pro
Absolutely.
shot, whatever. And I'm just like, if people are willing to sit through like a grainy footage of something like shot with a shaky camera because they love theater so much, imagine the audience that we're not tapping into because we're telling them that they don't have access to the work. And so it just kind of just boggles the mind. I'm just like, wow, like it's, radical hospitality, pay what you can. These are things that have historically worked. They work to get an audience in.
Yes.
So many audiences have been historically excluded from a lot of spaces, especially if it's a building-based organization. And I think, well, last story. I'm sorry.
No,
But
please, Caridad,
no,
I'm,
it's just
I'm
like,
not
oh my
doing
God.
that.
No, but there was a Mike Daisy it was some sort of, was on a podcast that he did or something. It was funny. And he talked about being in a cab in New York, and he was in a cab and he was going to the public theater we mentioned. Our school used to be going to the public theater. And and he said to the cab driver, I'm going to the public, and the cab driver was like, okay. Had no idea what he was talking about. Like, they ride up to the public, there's a taxi stops, he gets out, and he's like, and he said, it's a very important place. And he was like, yeah, never heard of it. Has nothing to do with me. I've never been in that building, and it was like, right. How would they, you know what I mean? It's like even a place that's sort of famous in New York isn't always accessible to everyone, right?
Yes.
And people think that's not for me. That's not for me. So, and Daisy talked about it. It was a podcast where he started to talking about accessibility in theater and about like who's it for and those questions that we're talking about today. And I always think about that anecdote because I think about like how many arts venues and arts organizations people pass by every day that feel that basically are like, that's not for me. Or
Mhm.
I don't even know what that is. Like it's there, it has banners and flyers or whatever. I don't know. So it's over there. It's not coming to me. It's not asking me of anything. It's not asking me questions. It's not asking for my opinion, and our work as playwrights is with audiences, right?
Absolutely.
So I wonder, as a playwright, when you craft things, how do you think about the audience? Where does the audience enter for you in the crafting of a play?
Before I get there, Caridad, I just want to say I feel like, as an emerging playwright, as for me, it's really important to hear from the OGs, because hearing the perspective of the OGs, hearing the history of theater, there are theater historians for a reason. So, that's why I'm like, let me hear what you got to say. I'm sitting down listening, and I feel like it's really, really important. It's really, like there's so many things I don't know, even though I'm trying to know. And to close that loop, I love Wedding Band, Stratford at Home, Wedding Band. That was so good.
Yes.
That's one of my favorite plays. And I think the $5 tickets, incredible. I love the idea of streaming plays. When I say technology is not good, I don't mean for streaming plays, because that's very good. But in general, yes, not bad. In terms of when the audience enters my work, it's tough. It's different for every play. I do try to think about how will the audience, like I do like take passes when I'm editing of like, how will the audience think about this? What is the question I'm asking the audience? How will they feel about this? And something I do think about a lot, because many of my plays, and I didn't mention this earlier in how I came to writing, but even though I loved playwriting and I was inspired by Franz Louis Benson and Marsh Norman, I didn't really write a play until I saw a friend at school being belittled and demeaned, and I wanted to write about the way the public education system treats young women of color. And most of my plays, frankly, are for someone. They're inspired by someone in my community that I know. Unfortunately, a lot of it does sprout from tragedy. And so I often think about, how is the audience going to be taken care of? How is the audience going to, like, I believe in hope, because I want, in the stories that I tell, I want us to imagine different possibilities, and I want the audience to feel, first of all, I mean, the audience is going to have their own interpretation, and usually the audience has a smarter idea than me, period. But I want people to leave the theater feeling good, particularly because I usually write for women of color.
Yeah.
And I feel like we don't get written about enough.
Yeah,
I mean,
totally. And also stories of stories. I like the same notion of feeling good when you walk up. Like sometimes I just feel like, oh, I feel even worse than when I came in. Stories that make you feel even worse. Like I already come in with tragedy because of the world. Oh, the tragedy. And then I have the thing, oh, even more tragic. Sometimes, of course, it's different, right? Like sometimes tragedy meets tragedy. Like the tragedy of the world enters a tragic space in theater, and you like feel enlightened, right? Like because of the play or the circumstance of how it's done, or etc. But sometimes you're like, oh, I feel even worse. I feel even worse. And I think that, oh, maybe that's not, I used to have mixed feelings about this, because I used to be like, it doesn't matter, it's all great and amazing. But I've been feeling lately like, I don't know that I want to feel worse when I walk out. If I'm gonna, also because theater takes effort, right? Like you make a choice to, like, let's say it's in person and blah blah blah, and you like go to the thing and you dress up or you don't dress up, whatever you do, but you make an effort. Like sometimes you have to take a car, or sometimes you have to take 2 buses, or sometimes you have to take a subway or something, like whatever. It takes effort to go to the thing on time, to do the thing, to just the whole extravaganza of it, right? So I think that it's about respecting the audience too. Like they've made a huge effort to meet you, right? It's like going to a party, right? Like they're like, I came to meet you, and you're like, nah, I hate you, go away. You know what I mean? I think that you know what I mean. Some plays are like, go away, I hate you, and I think that that's like a very, like, I mean, I understand work that's like vitriolic and like and sometimes that can be like snarky fun, but I also wonder about like the ethics around, like, you came all this way. But that's what I mean about thinking about the audience. You came all this way, and what is my relationship to you, playwright to audience, right? Like what kind of contract do I want to make with you for the next half hour, 10 minutes, 3 hours, like whatever the length of the piece is? What kind of ride do I want to take you on? If it is a ride, an experience, a journey, a ritual, a ceremony, however you're crafting it. But it's tricky when you're kind of like alienating the audience. But I will say that I think there's also work that is, as we know, alienating on purpose, right? And okay, it makes me think of an anecdote with a composer that he was like from in the EDM scene, and so theater was like theater. I don't know what's that theater over there, but they were like we were like in a playwright composer workshop, and there was the Worcester group was doing a show, and this was when I was in LA, and it was a show that they had rarely traveled with, so it was kind of an event. And I said, hey, you should go see this. I think you might find it interesting. And so he's like, oh, okay. And he was curious, so he went. And then he was like, oh, wow, are all plays like this is awesome. You know what I mean? And I was like, oh, no, unfortunately. Unfortunately, no. No, they were excited about like, wow, you could do this stuff with sound, and then there's like film, and then you're like, and it was like the actors were like super cool, and they were like really interesting and funny and weird, and I was like, yeah, it's not always like I was like, it's not always like that, but it was sort of interesting because that was their entry, that was their gateway, and they were like thrilled. They were like, oh, that's so cool. Is more theater like this? Is there more like this? And I was like, yes, there's more like this. Unfortunately, it's not always where you think it's going to be. But I think about that in terms of how theaters, let's say more conventional theaters, program their work. And sometimes it's like around theme or around subject matter, or they like this play or whatever. But very rarely do I see, on occasion it does happen, but very rarely do I see, oh, like, I always think about it like going to like a record store, like in the old days of going to a record, actually going to a record store, where you'd be like, there's like this kind of music there and that kind of music there and that kind of, and I always think, oh, why can't a theater season be like that? I'm like, I have my country album, and then I have the rock and roll one, and then I have the, whatever, like, then I have hip hop, and they're all kind of like part of the season. Thinking about it in terms of like modes of experience and modes of listening, and also because it reminds me when I was at UCSD, as we know, La Jolla Playhouse is on campus, and La Jolla at that time was doing, Peter Sellers was doing work, and like Robert Woodruff was doing work, and I saw some weird stuff. I saw some stuff that was like, and I was a student, right? So it was like, and that stuff I'd never seen before. Like, it wasn't like I had no access to that kind of work, and I was like, whoa, you can do this? Like, what? And it rocked my world. I was like, as a theater maker, like, who was a grad student, I was like, I just didn't know, right? Like, so, because I had no context for it. So suddenly it was like, oh, wow, you can do that. And it was on their main season, just like, whatever, Big River or whatever. Like, it was seen as a continuum. And I thought, oh, and then of course I thought it was always like that. And then I found out that that's not always the case when people program stuff.
Why are we sitting around the living room?
Why are we in the living room? I don't know. There's a lot of living rooms in theater. I want to talk a little bit about place, as I know we mentioned it briefly, but sort of circle back to this notion of geography or place in your writing. And do you start like with that when you work on a play? I know you mentioned sometimes it's for a person, but do you start with a location or a specific, like literally a city? Like, do you go, this is set in blah blah blah, and you write the thing? Yeah. How does place feature in your work?
That's a great, I love that question. I'm thinking about, every play is different. I like to think about where people are from and where they are now, and what the statement is for someone to be in a particular city, or what is exciting about this location, or what we haven't seen in this location. I do write a lot of plays that take place in Miami.
It's okay. It needs some love. So yeah.
I know, but I always feel like, not plays. I really don't feel this way about plays, but I do kind of feel like what people perceive of Miami and what Miami really is are not the same. So I always like to put two things that I don't think people expect together in terms of location. Like, oh, these type of women doing this thing here? Huh? Yes, that's true.
Cool. That's so awesome. I also wanted to you're at UCSD, you're literally in an office right now at UCSD. Ooh, very fancy. And I wanted to know what the experience of getting your MFA and now about to graduate, and I was like, how has that shaped you as a writer? Has it changed you in any way? Changed some of the questions you ask yourself as a writer, perhaps?
So many questions are different now. I think I came in a much more poetic writer, and I'm still poetic, but I think I didn't have as much of a handle on structure. And Naomi and Deborah are both really great with structure and help me in many ways. And I feel like the play I wrote last year, Dead Girls Quinceañera, like, that was a play that I'm really like, there's a structure there. There's a line there, we're going from one place to another, which was fun. It was fun to explore. I think I'm asking myself what is inherently theatrical about the story that I'm telling a lot more. Like, what makes this theatrical? How can I play with this? What would make this fun? How can I get the story told? I mean, really, because my experience in high school was really like I wasn't like learning or sitting down and taking like a theater study class. We were like kind of doing our own thing. We would like do a show. We spent most of our time just like doing shows, doing improv, you know, practicing for competition. So I took a couple classes in college, like on the side, but this is really the first time I've like studied theater in the sense of this is the main dramatic question. This is a moment of transformation. So it really has opened the doors, and I just want to play and keep learning. I'm also thinking about what yeah, that's pretty those are a few things. Yeah.
It's a couple of things, absolutely. And I think there's something, when you're in a grad school environment, like at UCC, which is I should contextualize for some people in the audience who may not know, is that they don't take a class of like 12 or 15 people, right? Like it's 2 or 3, right, every year. So I think that's a very different kind of experience in grad school. It also means a different kind of level of support for your
Yes.
productions or your workshops. If you're in a class of 15 and everybody's doing a workshop, well, good luck, right? Like there isn't the budget for that, right? So I think that, right, like it's just it's just reality, right? And so I think there's something very beautiful about like the much more concentrated experience that a program, let's say, I'm going to use the word smaller for a second. I don't mean that it's a small program, but more in the sense that it's a smaller class each year, so that in a sense you're given a lot more attention, which both has its good side and bad side, right? Like you can't get lost, right? You know what I mean? You can't get lost in the back of the room, as it were, when you're doing an MFA there. But you also have those resources at your disposal. And I think for me, one of the things that was difficult when I got my MFA was like I realized that those resources were no longer there. You know what I mean? Like I can't just walk into and open the door and like do the rehearsal there and then close the door. You know what I mean? Like suddenly you're in the real world and you're like, I got to rent the room and it costs how much, and like, but there's kind of the practical realities of like not having the stuff, right? Is very scary when you leave kind of this beautiful cocoon that is a grad school program. But I wonder what relationships you've forged in the program. I know that it's a program that has amazing directors and it has designers. So has that been influential for you in your playwriting practice?
Absolutely. Well, I will say I'm terrified to leave the cocoon. I just have to say that. And I think I'm so nervous. And well, one is like relationships with alumni, like UCSD alumni, particularly the playwrights, are so nice. You are so nice. Like Jeff Augustin, Lauren Yee, like all of these alumni, even if some of them come to the Wagner, some of them will respond to an email. So that's one really exciting relationship. And it's also exciting because I love all of these playwrights. I mean, like, and we have a couple Miami legends, so that's really exciting and and good. In terms of like peer-to-peer, the cohort is incredible. I have been really lucky to essentially witness the work and the growth and just the process of writers I really love and respect. Mylan Gray, Beth Highland, Katie Doe, Quentin, like all of these writers that I've been in a cohort with are great. And the culture of UCSD, in my experience, has been that we're showing up for each other to help each other write the best play we want to write. We all want each other to have the best productions. And when people come to our festival, which it's the only program in America that guarantees a playwright a production each year.
Yeah. Which is why I went, by the way. When I auditioned for UCSC, that was like the reason. I mean, one of the main reasons I said yes, because they were like, I was like, guaranteed production every year? Yes, because that's how you learn.
It is. I learned so much from production.
Yeah.
That's been my biggest teacher. I'm like, I feel like every production I become a better writer. I'm like, oh, I kind of get how to do this thing more. And I'm not just sitting in my room making people talk. And you start to think about the audience. Like in production is really when I think about the audience.
Yeah.
I'm like, how are they going to feel about that? Am I going to walk out after that line? Do I really want to sit here for 3 more minutes and listen to that? That's really exciting. A relationship that is very special to me that came out of the program is one with my stage manager from last year, Katie. She's brilliant. I got to I was scared. We didn't have enough seats for my last show, so I sat in the booth and hid underneath and watched her call my play. And it was a beautiful experience. I mean, she was taking care of my play, watching her as the stage manager, make sure everything was happening. She was taking care of actors. She was very present. That relationship, and that's something I've learned at UCSD. I mean, the stage manager, the artistry of a stage manager, right, to make sure all the beats are landing and being hit is one thing, but that relationship is very special. And there are a few like that, but that's definitely the closest to my heart. Yeah.
That's so cool. Stage managers don't often get a lot of love, and they're so important. And especially when you've been in a situation, which I hope you're never in, but where the stage manager isn't welcoming and isn't taking care of people. I've been in some of those situations, and you suddenly go, oh, in some weird way, when a stage manager is very good, you just weirdly take them for granted. It's like they're there, they do the thing, it moves like a machine. It's amazing. They're there, they understand how to read the room, and then you forget, right? When somebody doesn't do that, you're like, oh, wait a minute, hold on. So I'm so glad that I'm so glad you gave stage manager love, because they're unsung heroes often, and in the industry. And then I've always wondered. This is like a pipe dream, but I always wondered why the Tonys don't have because it's the big prize, so everybody knows what the Tonys are. But why doesn't it have an award for stage managers, like the stage manager of a show? I just think they're running that thing night after night, and it feels to me like where are the awards for these amazing workers, these arts workers? So just throwing that out there. Dreams. I like to end on the note of dreams. What dreams do you have for the field, for the theater, it can be big dreams, grand dreams, any dreams. I think this is also, related to, I'll contextualize this by saying that I often quote Mark Fisher and David Graeber on this series, but they're not the only people who say these things. But both of them used to say a lot about neoliberalism, that one of the things that neoliberalism does, and of course we're experiencing it now in a very extreme way because it's accelerated in the United States, is that it forecloses the future. It tells you that there is no future, right? What neoliberalism does is that it enforces learned helplessness and a kind of hopelessness, right? It says, well, nothing to be done. This is the way it is, right? The shrug of the shoulders kind of thing. So one of the things about dreaming is that I think it is active, right? It imagines a future that is possible. So yes, what are your dreams for the theater?
Oh, I love that question. Dreams are a core tenet of my work. I'm always thinking about the dreams of my characters, and I'm like, and that's super helpful, because I was like, why do I like dreams so much? What's up with that? I was thinking about that actually earlier today. I was like, why am I so why do I always want to give my characters a dream? A dream for the theater would be, and I'm stealing so much from this conversation, would be that productions move, that sets don't get destroyed, that people take that set and transfer it, giving even maybe perhaps, dare I say, donate them to smaller theater companies, to maybe community theaters, to other organizations to continue doing plays. Another dream would be that I remember I saw on my birthday, I saw a Batman movie for $1 because it was a Tuesday and they did dollar movie theaters. So I dreamed that they do $1 or $5 or $10. I mean, this is a good time for theater, because if there's an empty seat, you can sell it for $1 to someone in the lobby, and you got someone in the audience. I mean, people need things to do. Everything is so expensive. I'm like, let me just stay at home and read a play, because I can't go out. So that would be another dream. And then a dream would be that playwrights get a living wage. And everyone gets a living wage, which is truly a dream, because I know everyone's working really hard. I know producers are working hard, artistic directors are working hard. I know everybody's working hard, but I wish the government would fund theater and fund organizations so that everyone could have a living wage, because I think the model right now is unsustainable and it's not fair to any of the people working in theater.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, living wage, health insurance. There's so many things that we need, and in the industry, there, in this industry particularly, which is very classist
Mhm.
in the way it's structured. Um, you know, so many people leave the industry because they actually can't afford to stay in it. To be honest, right? They can literally can't afford. They don't have a wage. There's no health. The health insurance are hard to come by. Health insurance in general in this country is a minefield. Shouldn't be, but there we are. But in our industry, particularly, I've seen many more people having to leave the industry because they simply can't afford to be in it anymore. And I think that that's something that the industry needs to look at itself. And I know everybody's trying really hard, and I know everybody's working their butts off, but it has to do with the structures that we're in. And I think that part of dreaming is also about new structures, right? If we want to have
Yes.
structures, okay, because it can't all be anarchy, I suppose. But I think that what are the new structures that we can
Mhm.
imagine, and that are kind of you mentioned the word taking care before, and is it taking care of everyone? It's not just taking care of the audience, but also taking care of your arts workers, right? Who are putting themselves on the line every night, or at their computer for years on end before the play ever gets seen, if it gets seen, and I think that that's something that we need to value, and I think that in the U.S. Historically, the U.S. has had a very mixed relationship to the arts, in the sense that it's historically it's always seen the arts, at least if we think about it from the point of view of settler colonialism, has always seen the arts as a kind of frivolous thing. It's off to the side. It's an amusement at best, right? Like it's
Mhm.
not central. It's not central to culture. And you said something earlier about TV, which I thought was really interesting because it reminded me of like I've been seeing some discussions around this lately, a longing for a central experience, right?
Yes.
So, when people said, like, we all used to see that show together, and people, and yes, it establishes some sort of common ground. Like,
Mhm.
that that online. People do that, with Severance or other shows, but literally, oh, you have to have Apple in order to see it, and if you don't have Apple, you're out of the conversation. And then
Yes.
and so it's these kind of gated communities. I think about like a lot of streaming services create gated communities so that people, you know,
Oh my
it's like, well, I can't afford that subscription every month, so I'm not going to see it. So I'm out of the loop. I'm out of the loop of that conversation. Whereas when there's a wonderful writer named Sarah Kendzior, who I just love, and she
God.
she does this blog, and in one of her blogs, she was talking about um, that centrality of experience that she had when she was a child watching television. She said, this phrase from Sarah. She said, "I want the TV back in the box. I want that
Oh,
TV. I don't want it to be, I don't want it to be. I like when you could plug it in and it was the TV instead of you plug it
yes.
in and it's like 5,000 apps that you need to download, like everything." And she said, "I miss that. I miss that experience of like we all turn in to watch whatever and this and that and the other thing, and we all gather around it." And people do it now, I think, for other things like Super Bowl, or where it becomes like an event. But I
Yes.
think that on a regular basis, there was this thing of like it also has to do with reference points, so that people would reference things in culture, perhaps, and to some extent, people would be like, "I think I know what that is," right? You know what I mean? As opposed to now, you might be referencing to something, and it's like, "Well, you only know that if you're on this server, or you only know that if you're on that
Yes.
server," and it's like that's why people can't talk to each other. Like literally, I mean, it's one of the many reasons, but that is, I think a real dilemma, right? If everybody's in a gated community in their online experiences and in their amusement, entertainment, like whatever, in this culture of divorce from seeing art as central, then of course, you're like, I mean, you make me want to think about things. So it's like one of the things that I was thinking about is there's a wonderful short story writer and novelist named Brandon Taylor, and Brandon talks about he does this joke all the time online where he talks about American movies, and he says like in the U.S. people in American movies, people don't read. And what he meant was like, you'll see a movie and it'd be like, you never see like books on a table and like people, unless it's about books, you know, unless it's a movie about people being bookish or something, you'll never see like people just like in their like habitat, right? Like, you know, it's a scene in a living room and people are talking. You don't see like a stack of books and like what they're reading, and they don't reference books that they're reading, and they don't reference things that they're listening to, and you're like, what world do they live in? Like, you know, like literally, don't they have like stuff that they reference? And I think that lack of referential culture in like stuff that we're watching, right? He said he was, you know, explaining this in relationship to, I think, some French movie that he was watching, and he said, that's interesting. And like in that movie, those people are referencing things that are in the, that's what I talk about in the world, referencing things that are in the world. Like, did you read that? And did you listen to that thing? And then blah, 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 blah. And it's like, oh, right. Like we're like, especially if you're doing realism, if you're doing something that's not realism, okay, get it. Like it can be in its own planet. But if you're doing realism, let's say, surely you can reference things that are in the world for the people. And he said it's funny that he felt like in a lot of US films, especially what we would call sort of like studio, you know, things that have like wide reach to some degree and have some backing behind them, that there is this kind of like that pop culture, unless it's a comedy, interesting, unless it's a comedy, it tends to kind of not be like it's sort of like at the edges of the thing, unless it's historical or unless it's a comedy. And he said, you know, why don't we have that? And like there's also something like super cool about like characters that, you know, hey, I read, you know, Tolstoy today and I was thinking blah blah blah, and you're like, and with intentions, but literally it'll be like, you know, it's just part of life, that thing of art being part of life, right? That thing of like it's in you and you reference it, whether, you know, whether it be canonical or anti-canonical or like however you're referencing it. And he said, I miss that. Like I think we need that. And I think it's somewhat related to this notion of what is central and what gets to be central, and like how that's treated, and like how we are sharing work with others, and what common reference points do or can help, you know what I mean, for people to understand one another better, to be honest, right? We all laugh at the same joke,
yes,
right? Then it's like we've got that comment, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it's Saturday Night Live, right? Saturday Night Live has impacted politics in the past. I don't think it's impacting politics now, because not everybody's watching it. Not everybody has Peacock. I love Saturday Night Live, but people aren't watching it on the TV.
Yes, exactly.
Put it back in the box.
Exactly. Put it in the box. We need the TV in the box. We want it back in the box. I miss it. Sarah Kendzior, I love Sarah Kendzior. I will sing Sarah Kendzior's praises always, because they're an amazing writer, and they're one of the most astute writers about the U.S. kind of recent, I would say maybe the last 20 years or so of, shall we call it, kind of the decay of empire. And Sarah really articulates that in such an incredible way, from a very personal. Her writing is very personal, and but she's also, like, as a journalist, she really does her job. So it's always backed up, and the evidence is there, and all of that. But I love that. I was reading her blog, and I was like, oh, I want the TV back in the box, please. Yeah, so cool. Well, we're out of time. Oh my heavens, we're almost over. So I wanted to thank you so much, Phanesia, for being here. For those of you that are out there in our audience somewhere or listening, however you experience this, please check out Phanesia's work. Follow them and keep track of what they're doing, especially as they're graduating. And oh my heavens, it's so scary, but it's cool. It's just scary. It's going to be scary for a while. I'm just going to let you know, it's going to be scary for a while. And then it won't be so scary. It's just I think that first 2 months or so after you graduate, it's a little bit like people and where did we go, and also routine, right? Because you go to a class at a certain time. There's just something about like just being in an environment, a college environment, right? That kind of schedules your time in a different way, and so suddenly not having that is like a little bit weird, right? But it's all good. It'll be fine in its own way. Like I hate saying it'll be fine. magic. Like it's not magic, but I'm saying like that part of it, I think will subside, and it won't be so scary. But do follow Phanesia, everyone. They're amazing and they're a wonderful writer. And yeah, and check out back episodes of Conversation from the Alcove. Is this your first time checking us out? Lots of wonderful artists, with many different points of view, making work, and here to celebrate and lift them up as we can. As you know, if you have watched us before, I usually hit end recording after I say so long to you, but then stay offline with the artist for some nice chat after. So, but for now, thank you for watching or listening to Conversations from the Alcove. Bye.
Caridad, you got it right at 1 hour.
I did. I'm very good at this. But it's still recording. So we're here. We're still here with you. We're still here with you, everyone. So we're going to try to hit end recording.